They made £150 million worth of profit.
We will disagree on whether profit is a good or a bad thing, I'm
Profit's
sure.
okay.
However, you just said that they could make pay rises without impacting their profits. So where else is the money going to come from?
Yes, I know it's from 2022, and I'll explain the reason why later on, but what happens when a fantastic hero of the working class takes on a Tory MP who's not a hero of the working class at a Transport Committee meeting about rail strikes? You get the fantastic Mick Lynch saying it as it is to Tory MP Greg Smith.
Thank you for that answer. Can I just delve into this point about job security? That is very important to me. There are many constituents of mine that work on the railways and many other sectors. And job security is vitally important. We've seen through the pandemic massive change in rail use. Clearly in the pandemic people weren't travelling, and as we've come out of it, patterns have changed significantly. I've seen analysis that suggests that whilst the overall numbers are broadly back up, people are travelling at very different times and for different purposes, and some analysis suggests that that's leaving a roughly $2 billion hole in finances.
Was a £2 billion reduction in government funding.
We can look
That's
at it.
What's happened.
We can look at it whichever way, but with people aren't buying the peak time tickets as much, and they're travelling on the cheaper off-peak tickets and weekend tickets, that has an impact on the bottom line. I've seen some analysis that suggests that's around 2 billion.
It hasn't affected the bottom line because they've continued to make profit due to subsidy.
Well, we can come
so
on
it hasn't
to this.
affected the bottom line of the companies
I'm very happy to come on
at all.
to the profit point later, but I just want to look at this point that if the railways are bluntly to survive, they need people buying tickets to travel on them. The way people are choosing to buy those tickets and to travel does appear to be changing, either through home working, either through more weekend travel, leisure travel rather than work travel. Does the RMT accept that in order to secure everybody's jobs within the railways, something does need to fundamentally change in terms of making the railways attractive to people to buy tickets again, and having uncertainty over whether the train will be running in the first place is equally driving people away from the railways and back into their cars or coaches or whatever it may be?
I think you're absolutely right. The railway does need fundamental change, but it's not the one that the railway companies are seeking. We need a railway that runs in the interests of the people, in the interests of the economy and the environment, not in the interests of First Group and others who are subject to private equity takeovers because they're so attractive. The changes they wish to make to strip out wages and conditions are so that they can make increased profits going forward, and they're doing that at the behest of the Secretary of State and the previous incumbent in that job on an ideological basis. So what we need is lower fares. We need an incentivisation for people to get out of their cars and onto the railway. They won't do that with the current fare structure and the current industry structure, and they won't do that with the industry structure that's proposed under the Shapps White Paper for Great British Rail, because you'll keep the corrupt system of railway privatisation where there is no risk, where these people have got a one-way ticket to profit, as you've just heard, where even if they score 0 on customer satisfaction and are unable to run the trains at all when there's no industrial action because they've declared war on the staff and on the passenger, they will make profit no matter what happens, because that's the structure that's been put in place. So we need fundamental change, yes, but you don't need to attack the staff.
What do you believe was the average profit margin for a railway operator pre-pandemic?
It's quite low, but there's no risk. There's no risk to them at the moment.
Do you accept the 2% figure?
Probably 2%, but if there's billions of pounds in circulation, that is quite a comfortable living. If I was getting 2% of all railway income, I'd be doing quite well. And so normally businesses have to put capital at risk, don't they? Yeah. That's why they justify their profit. Well, this is a cartel of people that are working with the government to produce surpluses at no risk to themselves. Yeah. And no matter what their reputation is in this industry, the government will keep paying them. That is ridiculous, and I might put it, a corrupt system, because there's no incentive for them to make any change. The TOCs have taken £3.5 billion worth of profit out of the railway since privatisation. They haven't done anything for us because they've got no risk. And when they've had risk, they've handed back the keys.
Mr. Lynch, I would like to get into this profit point, because I think these figures are disputed. I've seen things from from your union that talks about £500-600 million profits, and yet there is equally data out there that suggests since privatisation, as you've raised it, that passenger numbers in fact doubled on the railways and have reduced roughly a £2 billion annual operating loss. And some of your figures don't seem to take into account the rolling stock costs and the supply chain.
They do, costs. And the rolling stock companies are making vast profits. Last year, when there were virtually no passengers, they made £150 million worth of profit.
We will disagree on whether profit is a good or a bad thing, I'm
Profit's
sure.
okay,
However,
the return of risk. Though.
I'm trying to understand, for the evidence base of this select committee, where the real profit is, because there is a lot of analysis out there that suggests the real operating profits of the railways is likely to be post-pandemic somewhere between 100 and 150 million pounds. Now, I'm sure we'll agree that is a lot of money, but that translates to about a 2% pay rise for 1 year, not the sort of numbers that we're talking about. So,
well, how does it translate to a pay rise? They could make the pay rises without getting rid of their profits. And you've got to ask the question, why are they in this business at all to make profit? We don't need private rail operating companies. If we've got with LNER and several other operators who couldn't cope, we don't need the incentive of private companies.
Understand, you just said that they could make pay rises without impacting their profits. So where else is the money going to come from?
It doesn't necessarily wipe out all of their profit, but I would be very happy if we had no private sector rail operators and we could pay the staff a proper wage.
That's what I love about Mick Lynch. Don't take no prisoners. Shame he's retired now, even though I fundamentally disagree with him about Brexit. But we can't have everything, can we? But yeah, totally agree with not having private companies running public transport, because the only thing that matters to them is profit and not people. Now, the reason why I did this is because I checked my analytics a couple of days ago and I noticed an old video was making a bit of a resurgence, and it's my most viewed video to date. So I watched it again, and I have to say, it got my select committee juices flowing again. Now, the thing is, I've watched a few recent select committee meetings, but there's nobody really interesting to a point that even I was basically losing interest. Too many boring people. Don't get me wrong, they had something interesting to say, but not enough to tweet your interest as well as mine. So I'm thinking of doing a bit of a playlist called A Blast from the Past, with old select committee meetings with either fantastic witnesses and loony MPs making an complete arse of themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, I'll still keep an eye out on the recent select committee meetings like the one we have here for you and for your viewing pleasure. So let me know down below what you guys think, and I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.